A peaceful alien planet called Andromas had always been a haven of tranquility, known for its beautiful landscapes, flourishing cities, and advanced technology. But that peace was shattered in an instant. The Galactic Empire, a brutal and unforgiving force, descended on Andromas with their full might. From space, massive warships rained down destruction, their advanced weaponry tearing apart entire cities. Their eye-controlled drones swarmed the skies, eliminating any resistance without mercy. The once thriving planet was now a burning ruin, struggling to fight back against an enemy that was simply too powerful. As the destruction unfolded, the people of Andromas sent a desperate distress signal to anyone who would listen. They knew they stood no chance against the Empire alone. Their hope was fading fast, and they were quickly running out of time. The message was intercepted by Earth, a planet long considered insignificant by the galactic powers. The alien race had no idea that their call for help would be answered by humanity, who had always been underestimated by others. On Earth, news of the attack spread quickly. The world's governments were thrown into turmoil, unsure of how to respond. The Empire's forces were far beyond anything Earth had ever encountered. The humans were technologically inferior, with outdated defenses and aging warships. But one person refused to give in to fear. Captain James Carter, the leader of Earth's military forces, stood before a group of generals and scientists, his face set in determination. He knew the risks. Earth had no chance in a direct confrontation with the Empire. Yet he couldn't stand by and do nothing. "We can't sit idly by and watch them die," Captain Carter said, his voice filled with conviction. "We fight to protect them. It's our duty." Many of the generals disagreed. "Captain, our weapons are obsolete. Our fleet is no match for their eye-controlled warships. We'll be wiped out before we even get close," one of the generals argued. But Carter was unmoved. He understood the stakes, and he knew the galaxy couldn't afford to let the Empire's tyranny go unchecked. Humanity's honor was at risk, and if the Empire wasn't stopped, they would continue their reign of terror, destroying everything in their path. After moments of tense silence, Carter made his decision. He ordered Earth's fleet to prepare for a daring rescue mission. He knew the odds were slim, but the alternative was unthinkable. Earth's best ships were activated, despite their outdated technology, and they began to mobilize. The fleet was small, barely a match for the Empire's vast armada. But Carter knew that humanity's biggest strength was their unbreakable will. They would fight, even if it meant facing certain death. The stage was set, and the countdown began. The humans were preparing for a suicide mission, fully aware that they might never return. As the Earth fleet made its way toward Andromas, the tension was unbearable. The fate of an entire planet, and perhaps the galaxy itself, rested on their shoulders. The ship's crew, a mix of brave soldiers and scientists, exchanged nervous glances. No one knew what to expect. Would they even survive the first wave of attack from the Empire? Could they really stop the unstoppable? It was a terrifying thought, but there was no turning back. Captain Carter stood at the helm of his flagship, the Endeavour, staring out into the void of space. The stars stretched endlessly before him, but he didn't see them. His mind was on the mission ahead. He had trained his entire life for moments like this, but nothing could have prepared him for the fear that gnawed at his insides. Earth was not a warlike planet. They didn't have the resources or the technology to challenge the might of the Galactic Empire. But what they did have was heart, a fierce, undying will to fight for what was right. "Prepare for battle," Carter ordered, his voice steady despite the uncertainty. "We fight for Andromas. We fight for the future." As the fleet moved closer to the Empire's blockade, every moment felt like an eternity. The ships cloaked themselves to avoid detection, using experimental technology developed by Earth's top scientists. The cloaking devices were far from perfect, and every ship in the fleet knew that they were risking everything for a single chance to strike. But time was running out for Andromas. The Empire's attacks were relentless, and if the humans didn't act now, it would be too late. The ships moved cautiously through the darkness of space, each one relying on the fragile cloak to remain unseen. It was a risky maneuver, but it was their only option. The stakes couldn't be higher. The first wave of attack would decide everything. If they failed, humanity's fleets would be wiped out, and the Empire would have no reason to stop their conquest of Earth. As the humans approached the outer perimeter of the Empire's forces, the tension escalated. The ship's cloaks flickered briefly, making their presence known to enemy sensors. Panic set in among the crew. The first few moments were chaos as alarms blared throughout the fleet. The Empire's drones, fast and deadly, quickly picked up on the disturbance, swarming toward the human ships with relentless speed. The small human fleet was outmatched, and the Empire's drones were too fast to outrun. "Hold steady," Captain Carter barked over the comms, his voice cutting through the panic. "Do not engage until we're in range." The cloaking devices flickered again, and it was clear that they were malfunctioning. The human fleet was exposed. An entire squadron of drones closed in on them, weapons charging. Earth's ships fired their primitive weapons in a desperate attempt to defend themselves, but they were barely effective against the Empire's defenses. It was clear that this would not be a simple fight. It was a fight for survival. Then, without warning, the sky exploded with a flash of energy blasts. One of Earth's warships was hit, and in an instant, it was engulfed in flames. The crew on board was lost in an instant. The surviving ships fought on, their engines roaring as they tried to break free from the incoming fire. The humans were losing. Every second was a battle for their lives. Their cloaking devices were no longer effective, and they were sitting ducks for the Empire's superior firepower. But Captain Carter refused to give up. As their first wave of attack faltered, he ordered a retreat, but the decision came too late. They had lost their first ship, and the Empire's reinforcements were already on their way. The human fleet was in deep trouble, and things were about to get much worse. As the surviving ships scattered into the blackness of space, the crew was shaken to their core. The battle had only just begun, and already they had suffered casualties. But Captain Carter's voice rang out over the comms again, calm and firm. "We're not done yet. We fight on." The hook ended with the human fleet, battered but determined, limping toward the Empire's core. The journey was far from over. The odds were still overwhelmingly stacked against them, but there was one thing that kept them going: humanity's unshakable resolve to never back down, no matter the cost. Would Earth's fleet survive the Empire's wrath? Could they save Andromas from total destruction? The countdown continued, and the answer to those questions remained uncertain. But one thing was for sure: Earth's fleet would stop at nothing to ensure victory. The fate of the galaxy depended on it. And as the fleet disappeared into the darkness of space, all eyes were on the brave humans who had dared to defy the impossible. Earth's fleet drifted silently through the vast expanse of space, its ships cloaked in a layer of invisibility. It wasn't perfect technology, far from it, but it was humanity's only shot at making it past the Empire's formidable defenses. The warships were old, their technology outdated, some parts patched together with whatever the engineers could find. The once proud fleet of Earth had been built during a time of peace, a time when humanity never imagined it would face an enemy as powerful as the Galactic Empire. Dr. Ilara Vin, the brilliant scientist who had developed the experimental cloaking device, stood near the control panel on one of the largest ships. She was calm on the outside, but inside, her heart raced. The device was untested in combat, and no one knew if it would even work when faced with the Empire's advanced detection systems. She knew the stakes. If it didn't work, the entire fleet would be exposed, and they would all be annihilated. Earth had no backup plan. The cloaking device was humanity's last hope. The fleet moved quietly, the stars stretched out before them in an endless sea of light. The tension was suffocating as the human warships crept closer to the heart of the Empire's territory. There was no turning back now. The fragile cloak made their ships invisible to the enemy. But the risk was immense. The slightest glitch, the smallest mistake, could give them away. But they had no choice. If they were detected now, the Empire's warships and AI-controlled drones would tear them apart before they even had a chance to strike. Captain Carter stood at the helm, his hands gripping the controls. His mind was focused, but his thoughts were heavy. He knew this mission was a gamble. Earth had nothing to lose, but everything to gain. As the fleet approached the Empire's stronghold, the pressure mounted. They had to get through undetected. If they failed, millions of lives would be lost, not just on Andromas, but on Earth as well. In one of the fleet's warships, Bonner, one of the best pilots in the fleet, sat alone in the cockpit. He had spent years training for this moment, but no amount of preparation could ever fully prepare him for the fear that gripped him now. He looked at the picture of his family taped to the dashboard, his wife, his young daughter. This could be the last time he ever saw them. He knew the risks of this mission. It was a one-way trip for many of them, but humanity's survival depended on what they did here. His heart swelled with love for his family and his people. If this was the price of saving Earth, then he would gladly pay it. "Bonner, you ready for this?" A voice crackled over the comms. He wiped the sweat from his brow, his grip tightening on the controls. "I'm ready, Captain," he replied, his voice steady despite the storm inside him. "For humanity." "Good man." Captain Carter's voice came through the comms again. "We'll be counting on you. Stick to the plan, and we'll get through this." Bonner took a deep breath, looking out at the vast darkness ahead. The fleet was moving closer to the Empire's stronghold now, the area of space where the most powerful weapons the galaxy had ever seen were stationed. The Empire's warships and drones patrolled the perimeter, a network of high-tech sensors constantly scanning for any sign of intrusion. They couldn't afford to be detected. The feeling of anticipation was almost unbearable. The entire fleet was holding its breath as they glided silently through the Empire's defenses. Every ship was on edge, every crew member tense. There were no words spoken, only the quiet hum of the engines, the occasional creak of the ship's hull. And then, without warning, the calm was shattered. A shrill alarm blared across the ships. The cloaking device, struggling to keep the fleet hidden, flickered for a brief moment. The tiniest disturbance in the cloak had been detected by the Empire's vast network of sensors, a secondary detection system that no one had expected to find activated. It was sophisticated, more advanced than anything Earth's fleet had encountered before. "All ships, engage evasive maneuvers," Captain Carter shouted, his voice sharp with urgency. "They found us." Bonner's hands moved instinctively as the control panel in front of him blinked red. His heart raced as the pursuit began. Space around him was no longer calm. A sudden explosion rocked his ship as enemy drones locked onto his position. He had no choice but to move. He slammed the throttle forward, sending the ship into a high-speed dive. His mind focused on survival, but his heart still beat for the mission ahead. Behind him, Earth's fleet scattered in all directions, attempting to break through the Empire's increasingly tighter net of drones and warships. The Empire's response was swift. Sleek, fast-moving drones darted toward the humans, their eye-driven minds calculating the perfect angle for attack. The humans' cloaking devices were no longer effective. The Empire had adapted quickly, and they were ready for the humans' tricks. Bonner's ship was a blur of motion as he engaged in a deadly space chase. His ship narrowly avoided a series of incoming laser blasts, each one sizzling past him with inches to spare. He was pushing the limits of the ship's old engines, the vessel groaning under the stress. He could hear the chatter of the other pilots on the comms, each one scrambling to evade the incoming attack. Their ships were taking damage, and the death toll had already begun to rise. "Bonner, watch your six," a voice warned him over the comms, but before he could react, the voice was cut off by a burst of static. Another pilot had fallen. The fight escalated. Earth's ships returned fire with what little they had. EMPs erupted from their warships, causing temporary interference with the Empire's drones, but it wasn't enough to stop the relentless onslaught. The drones were faster, more advanced, and they knew how to fight. It was an intense race through space, a high-speed chase where every move could mean life or death. Bonner felt his heart pounding as he maneuvered through the battlefield. The black void of space was alive with explosions, energy blasts, and the debris of destroyed ships. He could feel the tension in every move he made. One mistake, one miscalculation, and it would all be over. He heard another explosion behind him, and a warning light flashed on his dashboard. His ship had been hit. The outer hull was compromised. He pushed forward, knowing that every second counted. The fleet needed to survive. They needed to reach the Empire's core. But as more and more drones closed in, it became clear that their chances of survival were getting slimmer by the minute. "We can't keep this up," Bonner muttered to himself, sweat trickling down his face. His ship's engines were failing, and the cloaking device was useless in this chaotic battle. The odds of escaping alive were shrinking rapidly. "All ships, fall back. We got to regroup." Captain Carter's voice came through the comms, but it was drowned out by the loud screech of another collision. Earth's fleet was being overwhelmed. But they weren't done yet. They fought with everything they had, determined, defiant. No matter the cost, they would push forward. Humanity's future depended on it. The quiet of space was shattered as Earth's fleet launched into battle. The tension had been unbearable as they crossed into enemy territory, their cloaking devices now useless against the Empire's overwhelming presence. But Captain James Carter had ordered them to strike first, and the humans were determined to make every shot count. They had come prepared with guerrilla tactics, cloaked ships that would ambush the Empire's patrol squadron from hidden positions. It wasn't a fair fight. The humans were outmatched, their ships far less advanced than the Empire's. But their strength lay in their cunning, in their ability to fight smart rather than hard. The battle was fast and furious, with ships darting in and out of the shadows, firing rapid bursts of energy before vanishing once more into the darkness. Bonner's ship was at the front of the attack, and he led the charge with the same courage and skill that had earned him the respect of his comrades. As he maneuvered through the debris-filled battlefield, his heart raced. The Empire's ships were relentless, their eye-controlled drones swarming like insects, but Bonner and his fellow pilots had one advantage. They knew the terrain, and they had surprise on their side. "All ships, stick to the plan." Captain Carter's voice echoed through the comms. "We strike fast, we strike hard. Keep moving, stay unpredictable." The first few moments of the battle were chaotic. Explosions filled the space around them, bright flashes of energy lighting up the dark void. Human ships darted in and out of the Empire's patrol lines, using their superior maneuverability to strike at weak points in the Empire's defense. The humans were hitting hard and fast, managing to destroy several smaller patrol ships before the Empire could react. The sound of weapons fire was deafening, and Bonner's hands flew over the controls. His pulse pounded in his ears as he weaved his ship through a hail of enemy fire. The Empire's drones were closing in, but Bonner had no intention of giving up. His mission was clear: protect the refugee transport ship that was vital to the success of the mission. If it fell, humanity's chances would be all but destroyed. "Bonner, we need you to take out that drone swarm on the left," his wingman, Lieutenant Sarah Hayes, called out. "It's closing in on the transport." Bonner nodded grimly, taking aim at the incoming drones. He fired his weapons, sending a barrage of energy bolts into the swarm. His shots were precise, taking out several of the drones in a single blast. But the rest of the swarm didn't slow down. They had learned quickly, adjusting their strategy to avoid the human fire. The refugees aboard the transport ship were relying on Bonner and his fellow pilots to keep them safe. Every ship in the fleet knew that failure was not an option. As Bonner dove toward the swarm, his ship was struck by enemy fire. The cockpit flashed bright with warning lights as the damage indicators lit up, but Bonner pushed forward, unwilling to give up. His ship jerked violently as it took another hit, and this time the damage was too great. The hull cracked under the pressure, the control systems malfunctioned, and Bonner struggled to maintain control. He could feel the heat rising as the ship began to lose power. His mind raced. There was no way out now. Bonner. Sarah's voice cried out in panic. "You've got to get out of there." But Bonner knew it was too late. His ship was going down. With one last heroic act, he slammed his ship into the heart of the drone swarm, detonating his weapons in a final burst of energy. The explosion sent a shockwave through the surrounding space, taking out the remaining drones and buying the transport ship a precious moment to escape. Bonner's ship exploded in a fiery ball of debris, and his life was lost in an instant. But his sacrifice had saved the lives of many. The transport ship, protected by Bonner's final act, slipped through the chaos and continued on its path to safety. The rest of the fleet watched in horror and grief as Bonner's ship disintegrated before their eyes. His death struck deep into the hearts of the human soldiers. They had seen comrades fall before, but this felt different. Bonner had been one of the best, a symbol of hope and bravery. His loss would not be forgotten. "Bonner," Captain Carter whispered over the comms, his voice thick with emotion. "You won't be forgotten, soldier. We fight on. For you." The fleet pushed forward, but the battle was far from over. They had won a small victory, taking down a few enemy ships, but the Empire was far from defeated. In fact, as the humans celebrated their hard-won success, the enemy's reinforcements arrived. A new wave of Empire warships dropped out of hyperspace, their massive forms blocking out the stars. The humans, already weakened by the fight, could only watch in horror as the Empire's forces regrouped and advanced. The Empire's ships were far larger and more heavily armed than anything the humans had, and their AI-driven drones were relentless. "We can't fight them all," Lieutenant Hayes shouted over the comms. "We're outmatched, Captain." But Captain Carter refused to back down. "We fight with everything we have," he said, his voice filled with the same determination that had carried him this far. "We fight for Bonner. We fight for humanity." The humans had dealt a blow to the Empire, but the cost had been high. The loss of Bonner had left a hole in the hearts of every member of the fleet, but his sacrifice had sparked a fire in their hearts. They would not let his death be in vain. As the Empire's reinforcements advanced, the humans braced for the next phase of the battle. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and facing an enemy that had never known defeat. But one thing was certain: the humans would not go down without a fight. With Bonner's death fueling their anger and determination, Earth's fleet prepared for the next strike. They would face overwhelming odds, but they would never give up. The battle for humanity's survival was only just beginning, and they would stop at nothing to ensure that Bonner's sacrifice would be honored. The stage was set for an even more dangerous confrontation, one that would determine the fate of humanity once and for all. The remnants of Earth's fleet limped away from the battle, their ships battered, their morale shaken. Bonner's death weighed heavily on them all, but in the face of overwhelming odds, they had accomplished something extraordinary. They had survived a direct confrontation with the Galactic Empire, something that had never been done before. Now, Captain James Carter and his surviving crew had to find a way to turn the tide in their favor. As the fleet retreated into the darkness of space, the survivors took stock of their losses. They had barely made it through the last fight, but there was no time to rest. The Empire was relentless, and they would stop at nothing to destroy Earth and its allies. But Captain Carter wasn't one to back down. He'd seen what the humans were capable of, and he believed that their greatest strength lay in their resourcefulness, their ability to adapt and fight even when the odds were against them. In the midst of the devastation, Carter gathered his officers for an urgent meeting. The battle had shown them the Empire's true strength, and it was clear that they needed to hit back hard. But how could they stand a chance against an enemy that was so technologically advanced? Carter's eyes flickered to the holomap of the Empire's fleet, focusing on the largest ship in the center. the Empire's flagship. If they could disable its command system, they might have a chance to disrupt the Empire's coordinated attacks and buy humanity some time. "We can't beat them in a straight-up fight," Carter said, his voice grim but resolute. "But if we can infiltrate their flagship, we might be able to take down their command structure. Without that, they'll be forced to retreat or at least lose their coordinated advantage." The plan was risky, too risky, even, but it was the only option they had. Carter knew that this mission would be a suicide run for most of them. But if they didn't take this chance, the Empire would wipe them out, and the fight would be over before it ever truly began. Dr. Ilara Vin, Earth's top scientist, had been working tirelessly to come up with a solution. She was brilliant, a tactical genius who had already proven her worth in the last battle. As the humans regrouped, Dr. Vin was in her lab, scrambling to develop a weapon that could make this impossible mission possible. After hours of grueling work, she finally emerged with a breakthrough. "I've modified the eye-guided missile," Dr. Vin announced, holding up a device that looked like a compact, sleek missile. "This version is more powerful, with a targeting system that can lock onto the flagship's weak spots. It'll pierce their defenses, but we'll need to get close enough to launch it." The room fell silent. The missile was humanity's best hope, but launching it from a distance would be impossible. They would have to board the flagship itself to deliver the strike. It was a daring and dangerous plan, one that could result in total annihilation. Yet, in the eyes of every soldier in the room, there was only one response: determination. "Then it's settled," Captain Carter said. "We infiltrate the flagship, plant the missile, and take out their command system. This is the only chance we've got." The mood in the room was somber, but there was a shared resolve. The survivors knew what they were up against: an enemy that could not be reasoned with, an enemy that would not hesitate to destroy them. But it was the same spirit that had carried them this far, the underdog spirit, that now burned brighter than ever. With the plan set in motion, Earth's fleet prepared for the next phase of their fight. The humans would board the flagship using stealth technology, hoping to get close enough to plant the missile without being detected. The Empire's eye-controlled drones and soldiers were their biggest obstacle, but Carter knew they had one advantage: their ingenuity. Earth's forces may have been under-equipped and outgunned, but their resourcefulness would carry them through. As the humans made their approach to the flagship, the suspense was palpable. Every crew member held their breath, knowing that once they launched this operation, there would be no turning back. The first phase of the mission was a covert operation, using cloaking devices and assault drones to infiltrate the Empire's defenses. Their entry would be swift, and their movements would need to be calculated. The Empire's sensors were sophisticated, and even the slightest mistake could result in their discovery. With everything on the line, the humans launched their attack, moving quickly and quietly through the void of space. Their cloaked ships barely registered on the Empire's scanners, and they managed to slip past the Empire's outer defenses undetected. The flagship loomed ahead, an imposing, monolithic structure that towered over the rest of the fleet. It was an intimidating sight, but the humans were undeterred. This was their moment to strike, and they were determined to make it count. As they boarded the flagship, the humans faced their first real test: close-quarters combat with the Empire's soldiers and their advanced eye-controlled drones. The flagship's interior was a maze of dark corridors and high-tech security systems, but the humans pressed on. They had trained for this, and now it was time to put their skills to the ultimate test. The combat was brutal. The Empire's soldiers were formidable, trained in the most advanced forms of combat, and their drones were relentless. But the humans fought with a fierceness born of desperation. They were outnumbered, outmatched, but they had something the Empire could never have: the will to survive. As the humans moved through the flagship, they encountered fierce resistance at every turn. The Empire's soldiers were highly trained, their eye-controlled drones relentless. But Earth's soldiers were determined. They fought tooth and nail, using their resourcefulness to stay one step ahead. The battle was fierce, and it took everything the humans had just to hold their ground. Lieutenant Sarah Hayes led the charge, her energy rifle firing with deadly precision as she cut down the enemy drones. Her team fought hard, their bodies bruised and battered, but their spirits unbroken. With every step they took, they inched closer to the heart of the flagship, closer to the command center where the missile had to be planted. The humans had made it this far, but the battle was far from over. As they breached the command center, a final wave of Empire soldiers confronted them. The firefight was intense, with close-quarters combat spilling into every hallway. Explosions rocked the flagship as Earth's soldiers fought with everything they had, each victory coming at a cost. But finally, after what seemed like an eternity, they'd reached the command center. Captain Carter and Dr. Vin worked quickly to plant the missile, but they knew time was running out. The Empire's forces were closing in, and their chances of escape were growing slimmer by the second. Just as the missile was armed, a powerful explosion rocked the flagship. The humans had succeeded. The Empire's command system had been destroyed. With the mission complete, the humans fought their way back to the extraction point, their hearts pounding as they faced down the final wave of Empire forces. They had done it. They had struck a decisive blow against the Empire. But as they fought to survive, they knew the battle was far from over. The war for humanity's future was just beginning. The flagship loomed ahead, its colossal structure bathed in the eerie glow of distant stars. For Captain James Carter and his team, this was it, the final push to end the Empire's reign of terror. With Dr. Ilara Vin's missile now armed and ready, the humans knew that the stakes were higher than ever. The last few hours had been a blur of stealth, combat, and desperation. But now, standing on the brink of the ultimate confrontation, they had one final chance to strike a devastating blow. The control room of the flagship was a massive high-tech chamber, its walls lined with holographic consoles and advanced security systems. The humans had fought their way through endless corridors to reach this moment, and now every breath they took was heavier than the last. They had made it this far, but there was no guarantee they would make it out alive. Captain Carter's voice cut through the tension, steady and resolute. "We plant the charges, hold off the enemy, and make our escape. No matter what happens, we finish this." The humans moved quickly, knowing time was running out. They had only one shot to destroy the flagship and cripple the Empire's forces. The weight of the mission bore down on them, but the resolve in their eyes was unmistakable. They were fighting for humanity's survival, and for the hope of the countless innocent lives they had promised to protect. As the team worked to plant the explosives around the command center, a heavy pounding sound echoed through the control room. The Empire's soldiers were closing in. Captain Carter's team had been under constant assault throughout the infiltration, and now, with the charges in place, the final battle was upon them. The last few minutes would decide everything. "Move. We don't have much time," Captain Carter barked, his voice filled with urgency. The humans had set the explosives in key areas of the flagship's command center, designed to disable its control systems and send the massive warship into a self-destruct sequence. But it wasn't just the flagship they were targeting. It was the entire Empire's command structure. If the humans could take down this flagship, they would disrupt the Empire's entire fleet, giving Earth a fighting chance. Meanwhile, outside the flagship, the remaining forces of Earth's fleet launched their final assault. They had waited for this moment, the moment when the flagship would be on the verge of destruction. They would strike with everything they had, massive missile salvos and orbital bombardment that would rain down on the Empire's forces like a fury of the gods. This was a fight for survival, and they were giving it everything they had. In the control room, the atmosphere was electric with tension. Dr. Vin, who had been instrumental in developing the missile that would ultimately cripple the Empire's fleet, worked alongside Captain Carter. She was brilliant, and her mind had been the key to unlocking this mission's success. But despite the urgency of the situation, Dr. Vin remained calm, her focus unwavering. The success of the mission depended on her actions. "We're ready," Carter said, turning to Dr. Vin. "Once the charges are set, we need to get out. It's now or never." But just as they were about to make their move, the Empire's forces broke through, and the first wave of soldiers stormed into the control room. A deafening roar of gunfire erupted as the humans turned to face the overwhelming numbers. The battle was about to reach its brutal climax. "Go, get to the ship," Carter shouted as he fired his weapon, taking down 2 Empire soldiers in quick succession. The rest of the team continued to plant the charges, moving swiftly and decisively. The blasts would be enough to cripple the flagship, but they had to ensure they escaped before the explosion triggered the final countdown. Dr. Vin, her hands trembling slightly, looked back at Carter. She had always known the risk of this mission, but now, as the Empire's forces closed in on them, she understood that the price of success might be her life. She had given everything to humanity's cause, and now she would give one final act of sacrifice. "Captain, you need to get to the escape pod," Dr. Vin said, her voice firm but soft. "I'll stay here. I'll make sure the mission succeeds." Carter's eyes widened. "No, you can't. We can make it out together." But Dr. Vin shook her head. "The charges need to be activated manually. If I don't stay, the mission won't succeed. I'm the only one who can do it. I've made my peace." With a look of determination, Carter knew there was no arguing with her. She had always been the smartest, the bravest among them, and this was the price she was willing to pay. "Then I'll see you on the other side, Doctor," he said, his voice breaking slightly. As the rest of the team made their way toward the escape pod, Dr. Vin remained behind, focusing on her task. The clock was ticking. Every second brought the Empire's soldiers closer, but she didn't flinch. She had come this far, and now she would ensure that her sacrifices, and the sacrifices of all those who had fought alongside her, meant something. As she activated the explosives, the control room began to shake. The lights flickered, and the walls of the flagship trembled as the countdown began. The missile strike had been launched, and Earth's fleet began their final bombardment. Explosions erupted outside as orbital missiles rained down, lighting up the darkness of space. The flagship was under assault from all sides, and the Empire's command structure was crumbling. But in the control room, there was no time to celebrate. Dr. Vin's final moments were spent ensuring that the mission would be a success. With a final, satisfied look at the countdown timer, she turned toward the door, knowing she wouldn't make it out. The explosion that would obliterate the flagship would also take her life, but her sacrifice had ensured the future of humanity. The blast was deafening. The explosion ripped through the flagship, sending shockwaves through space as the enormous warship was torn apart. The Empire's forces were caught off guard, their once unbeatable flagship reduced to a fiery wreck. The humans had done it. They had struck the final blow. Captain Carter and the remaining crew made it to the escape pod just in time. They looked back, watching as the flagship and the heart of the Empire's fleet disintegrated into the void. Dr. Vin's sacrifice had given them the chance they needed to win. As Earth's forces launched their final assault, the battlefield lit up with the destruction of the Empire's remaining ships. The mission had been a success, but the cost had been high. The humans had triumphed, but the price of victory had been the lives of some of their bravest. And as Captain Carter looked out at the stars, he knew that this was only the beginning of the war. The Empire had been crippled, but they were far from defeated. Humanity had proven its strength, its resourcefulness, and its unbreakable will to survive. And no matter the cost, they would fight on, for the future of Earth and the galaxy itself. The battle had been long and grueling. The final explosion that had destroyed the flagship of the Empire echoed through space like a death knell, signaling the fall of a once mighty force. Yet, as the dust settled and the last remnants of the Empire's fleet retreated, the universe seemed to take a collective breath, as if waking from a long nightmare. Humanity, battered but not broken, had achieved the impossible. The survivors of Earth's fleet stood on the surface of a newly liberated planet. The skies above were clear, free from the shadow of the Empire's oppression. The enslaved alien race that had been forced to work under the Empire's cruel rule now stood beside their liberators, their eyes filled with awe and gratitude. Together, they watched as the last ships of the Empire's fleet fled into the far reaches of space, defeated, humiliated, and broken. The war was over. Captain James Carter, standing tall amid the wreckage of battle, looked out over the horizon. The war was won, but the cost had been high. His thoughts were heavy with the memories of fallen comrades, of Bonner, whose bravery had saved so many, and Dr. Ilaravin, whose sacrifice had ensured humanity's victory. Their deaths had carved a deep wound in his heart, one that would never fully heal. But their sacrifices had not been in vain. They had given everything to secure a future for Earth and the galaxy's oppressed. Beside him, the surviving members of Earth's fleet stood together, their faces a mixture of relief and sorrow. There was no triumph in their victory, no cheering crowds, no fanfare, just the quiet realization that they had achieved what seemed impossible. The Empire was gone, but the pain of loss still lingered. The survivors turned to the alien refugees, who had once been slaves to the Empire, but were now free. The bond between the two groups was undeniable. In the face of such adversity, they had become more than just allies. They had become family. The alien refugees, once subjugated and broken, now stood proud, their eyes shining with hope. They had witnessed the bravery of the humans, their unyielding determination, and their refusal to accept defeat in the face of overwhelming odds. The humans had shown them what it meant to fight for freedom, for justice, and for the future. And now, they were ready to stand with them. "I never thought I'd see the day when the Empire would fall," said Kara, the leader of the freed aliens. Her voice was filled with a mix of disbelief and gratitude. "You humans, you've done something we could only dream of." Captain Carter looked at her, his eyes reflecting the weight of the journey they had all been on. "We fought because we had to," he said simply, "and we didn't do it alone. Together, we're stronger." The survivors gathered around Kara and the other alien leaders. An alliance was formed, not just between two species, but between all those who had been oppressed by the Empire's iron grip. The galaxy, once under the Empire's shadow, was now on the brink of a new era, a new dawn for humanity and for the oppressed races that had been freed. As the survivors looked up at the sky, they knew that this was just the beginning. The Empire may have been defeated, but there were still challenges ahead. The galaxy was vast, and while the Empire's forces had been crippled, there would always be those who sought power, control, and domination. But now, humanity and its new allies stood as a united front. They were no longer the underdogs, no longer the small, insignificant force that had been mocked and underestimated. They had proven their worth, their courage, and their resolve. And in doing so, they had earned the respect of those who had once seen them as weak. As the sun set on the freed planet, the survivors stood together in silence, their hearts heavy but filled with a sense of purpose. They had come so far, and they had lost so much. But they had also gained something invaluable: the trust of their new allies, the strength of unity, and the promise of a brighter future. In the face of overwhelming odds, they had prevailed. The final scene showed the humans standing tall as a new power in the galaxy, humble yet unyielding. They were no longer the outsiders. They had proven themselves. And now, they would take their place among the stars. The galaxy was vast, and there would be challenges ahead, but the humans had learned something invaluable in the fires of war. They had learned the power of unity, of standing together against all odds. And with that strength, they would forge a new path, one that was theirs to shape. The story closed with a powerful message. Even in the darkest of times, even when all seems lost, there is always hope. There is always the possibility of a new beginning. The strength of humanity lay not just in its technology or its firepower, but in its heart, in its courage, in its refusal to give up. Bonner and Dr. Venn may have given their lives for this victory, but their legacy would live on. Their sacrifices had ignited a flame of hope that would burn for generations to come. The humans had done what seemed impossible. They had stood up to the Empire, and they had won. And now, they would stand together, united as one, to face whatever the future held. The survivors gathered one last time, their eyes looking to the horizon, to the stars. The battle had been won, but the war for the future had only just begun. And with that, they stepped forward, ready to embrace the challenges ahead. This was humanity's new dawn, the dawn of a new era, a dawn of hope.